Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we dive into the source material, the research, the articles, sometimes even internal docs, and we really try to pull out what matters.
Find the signal in the noise.
Exactly. And today, we are tackling something pretty fundamental, institutional trust, specifically in professional sports. I mean, you look around right now, the NBA, NFL, MLB, they're all partnered up big time with sports betting companies.
Right. The lines are blurring.
Totally. The game itself, so
Yeah.
the content, sure, but the betting action, that's where huge money is flowing. And it kind of forces this uncomfortable question, doesn't it?
It really does.
When the leagues themselves are profiting directly from the odds, and then something happens, some scandal that hits integrity. Well, who's actually keeping score then? Who can keep score?
And that tension, that's exactly what we're digging into today. You know, the purity of the sport versus the profit motive.
Right.
So our mission here is to look at the history, the pattern of scandals. We'll start with more recent stuff, but we'll go way back too. We want to see how these massive sports institutions react when their integrity gets challenged, whether it's like gambling from the outside or maybe cheating from the inside to get an edge, make more money.
And what are we expecting to find?
Well, the sources suggest a cycle. It often looks like denial at first, then maybe some slow incremental changes.
Until things get really bad.
Exactly. And the corruption, it doesn't really go away, it just changes shape, it evolves.
Okay, so if we're starting modern, we can't just look at one instance, right?
Yeah.
We need to see them as, like, warnings.
That's a good way to put it. Take the NBA, the 2007 Tim Donaghy scandal. That wasn't just about one corrupt ref.
No.
It was a massive red flag about how vulnerable a whole league, a whole institution could be.
Yeah, it really cracked open that whole idea of impartial officiating.
Blew it wide open. Because the game absolutely relies on the refs being neutral, right? And the thing that really kicked it off, according to the documents we looked at, was June 20th, 2007.
Okay, what happened then?
That's when the FBI contacts the NBA. They say, look, we're investigating one of your referees, Tim Donaghy, the allegation. He's betting on games, possibly games he officiated.
Wow. Okay. And how did the league react, specifically Commissioner Stern at the time?
Well, this is really telling about how these big leagues operate. Stern didn't push back. He actually welcomed the FBI.
He did. Why?
His quote was something like, authorities can do things that I can't do legally.
Huh. That's quite an admission.
It really is. It shows the limits, right? A private company, even a huge one like the NBA, doesn't have subpoena power. They can't tap phones. They don't have the state's resources.
So when faced with something potentially criminal, something potentially involving organized crime,
they need the government to step in and do the heavy lifting, to really vet their own people, essentially.
Okay, so Donaghy eventually pleads guilty. What were the specifics? Conspiracy, wire fraud.
Right. And transmitting betting info. The core of it was that he bet on games he worked.
Using inside knowledge.
Exactly. Info about players, maybe injuries, relationships between refs and players, team dynamics, stuff only an insider would know. Using that to get an edge on the point spreads.
And he wasn't using Vegas bookies, right? The sources said it was different.
Correct. The reports indicated it wasn't through the usual Las Vegas channels. It suggests a smaller, maybe more localized network, people exploiting the system from within or close to it.
So the whole thing relied on him actually influencing the games, making certain calls or maybe not making calls.
That was the allegation, yes. Affecting the score just enough to cover the spread he bet on.
You'd think, given the stakes, the NBA would have had super strict anti-gambling rules even back then.
Oh, they did. And that's part of why it was such a shock. The policy was incredibly strict. It banned basically all gambling for employees.
Not just on games.
No, like even slot machines, friendly poker games, total prohibition.
Really? Any exceptions?
Just one, apparently negotiated by the union, betting at the racetrack, but only during the off-season.
Okay, so a tiny loophole, but generally very strict.
Extremely. The goal was zero tolerance for anything that could even look like a conflict of interest.
So if the rule itself was tough, the failure must have been in, what, monitoring, enforcement. How did he get away with it?
Well, this is where it gets murky, because the NBA was already doing quite a bit of monitoring.
Oh, really?
Yeah, starting around the 2003-2004 season, they had this system. About 30 observers, one at every single game.
Yeah, doing what?
Their whole job was tracking the referee's performance every call they made, and importantly, every time they didn't make a call when maybe they should have, an incorrect non-call.
Wow.
All that data got logged, compared against game tapes, audited by supervisors. It was a pretty sophisticated internal policing system aimed at statistical accuracy, consistency.
And yet, Donaghy operated under the radar for years with this system in place.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder, was it just one bad apple finding a crack in a good system?
Or was the system itself not really addressing the core issue? Or maybe the culture?
That's the deeper, more damaging possibility, and it comes straight from Donaghy's side of the story.
What did he claim?
While the NBA painted him as this lone wolf, this rogue actor,
Which makes sense for damage control.
of course, but Donaghy fired back. He alleged the problem was systemic. He claimed something like 60 to 75% of NBA refs had grudges.
Grudges. Against players? Coaches?
Yeah. Personal beefs, financial worries, maybe. Things that could consciously or subconsciously affect how they call the game.
Okay, if that's true, that changes everything.
Completely. It's not just about external gambling corruption then. It's
Right.
about internal bias, politics, maybe even toxicity impacting the game itself.
Can you even monitor for that effectively? Human bias, petty grudges.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Especially when millions ride on those split-second calls. The league suddenly had to fight the idea that maybe the whole referee pool was compromised not just by betting, but by these internal factors.
So what did the NBA do right after the scandal broke? Did they immediately roll out huge new reforms?
Here's a crucial piece of context from the sources. The NBA was already moving towards tighter controls, but slowly.
Before the FBI call.
Yes. Starting with the 2005-2006 season, so a couple of years before Donaghy blew up, they had already decided to implement deeper background checks.
What kind?
Annual criminal and credit checks for all referees.
Okay, so they saw a need for more scrutiny even before Donaghy.
It appears so. Now, Donaghy's exposure absolutely put rocket fuel on further reforms, no doubt, but the initial move towards tighter vetting happened earlier.
What does that tell you about how these institutions work?
It suggests they often prefer slow, internal adjustments, incremental changes, until something big and external, like an FBI probe, forces their hand and demands a much faster, more dramatic public response.
That's a pattern. Slow internal shifts, then bam, external pressure forces big change. We see that again and again, don't we?
Absolutely. And to really grasp the power a commissioner holds today, the power to ban someone like Pete Rose, for instance, regardless of courts, we need to rewind way back.
To baseball's big one. The original sin, you called it.
We have to talk about 1919, the Black Sox scandal. This is the bedrock. This event created the modern commissioner's almost dictatorial power in American sports.
Okay, set the scene. Chicago White Sox, World Series, Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, one of the most infamous fixes ever. 8 players on the heavily favored White Sox agreed to deliberately lose the 1919 World Series.
Why?
They were getting paid by a gambling syndicate. There was also bad blood. The players felt seriously underpaid and disrespected by the team owner, Charles Comiskey. That resentment made them vulnerable.
And organized crime was involved? Arnold Rothstein.
He was heavily implicated, rumored to be the mastermind, the bankroller, but the actual evidence connecting him definitively, it's still debated, kind of murky.
Did the fix work?
Oh, yeah. The Reds, the underdogs, won the series 5-3. The Sox players threw games.
And the aftermath wasn't just a sports story, it was a legal mess.
A complete fiasco. The investigation started, indictments came down in 1920, leading to a trial in Chicago in 1921. But then, things got weird.
How so?
Key evidence vanished. Signed confessions from crucial players like pitcher Eddie Saccott and the legendary shoeless Joe Jackson. Gone. Poof. From the courthouse.
Seriously? What happened then?
Well, without those written confessions hanging over them, the players changed their stories. They recanted, claimed they were pressured or tricked into signing them in the first place.
And did those confessions ever turn up?
They did, months later, after the players had been acquitted by the jury,
Where?
in the possession of the lawyer representing the White Sox team owner.
Whoa.
Okay. Hey.
That strongly suggests.
A deliberate cover-up, right? An institutional effort, maybe by the team or league interests, to suppress the most damaging evidence, protect the brand, even if it meant interfering with justice. Self-preservation over truth.
We talk about the Black Sox as this big group, but the actual indictment got specific about who lost out, didn't it?
It did. It named one of the clean players, right fielder Shano Collins, as a victim. Because his teammates threw the series, he lost his legitimate winner's share of the World Series bonus, about $1,784 back then.
Which was real money.
Absolutely. It brings this abstract idea of lost integrity down to earth.
Mm.
Real money taken from an honest player by his corrupt teammates.
But despite all this, the trial ended in acquittal. The jury let them off.
They did, which makes what happened next even more stunning.
Judge Landis?
Kennesaw Mountain Landis. Baseball was in crisis, public faith shattered, so the team owners dissolved their old governing structure and appointed Landis as the very first commissioner of baseball.
With what kind of power?
Essentially absolute power, a mandate to clean up the game and restore trust.
And his first major act?
He banned all 8 implicated players. For life. Permanently, regardless of the jury's verdict.
So the legal system said not guilty, but Landis said, you're out.
Precisely. He acted completely outside the legal finding. Judge, jury, and executioner for baseball.
That seems incredibly authoritarian, even if it arguably saved baseball's reputation.
It's the paradox at the heart of American sports governance, established right there. Landis declared that the institution's integrity trumped the legal system.
What is his reasoning?
His famous statement basically said, any player who throws a game is out, but also any player who knows about a fix, who sits in confidence with a bunch of crooked ball players and gamblers and doesn't immediately report it to his team, they're out too.
So silence was betrayal, association was guilt.
Exactly. He built this fortress around baseball, designed to keep the external threat, gambling, out.
A fortress against external corruption.
Well,
But fast forward several decades.
and the threat flips completely. It's not about throwing games anymore. It's about enhancing performance, cheating to win, not to lose.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The steroid era in baseball, late 20th, early 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
And the institutional failure here feels different. It wasn't about failing to catch something hidden. It feels more like willful blindness.
That's a very accurate way to put it. This was a different kind of corruption, maybe more insidious. Major League Baseball had massive, overwhelming incentives to just look the other way.
Why?
Money. Pure and simple. You had players like Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds hitting home runs at unbelievable rates, shattering records.
They became larger-than-life heroes.
Comic book heroes, as some sources put it. And those home runs, they directly translated into cash. Huge TV ratings, packed stadios, merchandise flying off the shelves. The league was making bank.
So the accusation is they weren't just tolerating potential cheating. They were actively profiting from the results of that potential cheating.
It certainly looked like a systemic lack of curiosity, let's say, a lack of desire to dig too deep. Congress later basically said as much.
And this blindness was helped by a legal situation, right? Something about supplements.
Yeah, this is critical. The 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHEA.
Okay, unpack that. What did it do?
It fundamentally changed how supplements were regulated. It treated them more like food than drugs. Basically, a substance was considered safe unless the FDA proved otherwise.
Which created a loophole.
A massive one. It allowed things called steroid precursors, chemicals, that the body converts into steroids like androstenedione or andro.
Ah, I remember Andrew.
Right. It allowed andro to be sold legally right over the counter in health food stores.
So when Mark McGwire was chasing the home run record in '98, and reporters saw a bottle of Andro in his locker.
It exploded into the headlines, but technically,
Right.
it was legal to buy and possess at the time. It completely blurred the line between a legal supplement and chemical enhancement.
And the commissioner back then, Bud Selig, what was his stance?
His public stance, his testimony later, was one of surprise. There's this famous anecdote where he said he personally didn't even really know what Andro was
Seriously.
until he saw it being sold openly in his local pharmacy in Milwaukee.
Wow. Whether true or not, that paints a picture of institutional disconnect, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The money's rolling in, the records are falling like dominoes, and the league leadership is claiming ignorance about the very substance fueling a lot of it.
So this kind of passive, maybe profitable ignorance, how long did that last?
It lasted until the government basically forced the issue, turned up the heat significantly.
Congress.
Yep, March 2005. The House Committee on Government Reform holds these incredibly high-profile televised hearings on steroid use in baseball.
What was the leverage? Why did MLB have to listen?
The unspoken threat was huge. Congress hinted they might revisit baseball's cherished antitrust exemption. That exemption is incredibly valuable financially. That got their attention.
So they had to show up. Top players, league officials, under oath.
Exactly. And those hearings produced some unforgettable and deeply uncomfortable moments.
The player testimonies, let's talk about those. Palmeiro.
Rafael Palmeiro, pointing his finger very emphatically. Let me start by telling you this. I have never used steroids, period.
Which became instantly infamous because...
He tested positive later that same year. It just destroyed his credibility.
Then there was McGuire.
Mark McGuire. He took a different tactic. Clearly lawyered up, probably advised not to perjure himself or implicate anyone else. His line was just repeated refusals. I'm not here to talk about the past.
Stonewalling.
Total stonewall, refusing to answer questions about whether he used, effectively pleading the fifth without saying it.
And Jose Canseco, he'd already written a tell-all book.
Canseco was the whistleblower, in a sense. He claimed steroid use was absolutely rampant. He basically said, look, it was so obvious there's no way trainers, managers, GMs, maybe even owners didn't know what was going on.
That's the accusation of systemic knowledge again. Not just blindness, but maybe complicity.
Right, that it wasn't some hidden secret. It was an open secret. The hearings really put the institution on the spot. Were they just blind, or were they willfully blind because the cheating paid so well?
What's fascinating here is the testimony that maybe had the biggest impact wasn't from the players or officials.
No, it was from the parents.
The parents of young athletes who had died.
Absolutely devastating testimony. Donald Hooten talking about his son, Taylor. Denise Garibaldi talking about her son, Rob.
That was their story.
Their sons were high school athletes who got caught up in the pressure to use steroids to get bigger, stronger, faster. Taylor Hooten was a promising pitcher, tall but maybe lean.
And coaches told him he needed to bulk up.
That was the testimony. Pressure to get bigger, to compete. And both families described the horrific consequences. Severe depression, uncontrollable rage, roid rage, paranoia, psychosis. Taylor Hooten tragically took his own life.
And they link this directly to steroid abuse.
They did. They detailed the psychiatric side effects, things documented in medical literature, and their message to Congress and maybe more directly to the players sitting there.
What was the message?
That the pros were role models, whether they liked it or not, that the culture of cheating at the top was filtering down, creating immense pressure on kids. They basically accused the players and the league of fueling a public health crisis among young athletes.
Urging them to stop hiding behind the union, stop making excuses.
And face the consequences. Because kids were dying, it completely shifted the narrative from just cheating in a game to real-world tragedy.
That kind of public pressure, that shaming, it must have finally forced MLB to implement a real policy.
It did. But even then, the initial steps were criticized as being weak, full of loopholes.
Well, technically, hadn't steroids been banned before?
Yes, the commissioner's office had listed steroids as prohibited way back in 1991. But
no teeth.
Exactly. No mandatory test program. It was just a rule on paper, a paper tiger. Real mandatory testing only started after the 2002 collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association. And even that was just survey testing at first.
What did that initial survey find?
In 2003, the positive rate was between 5 and 7%. That's a significant chunk of players.
Did it drop once penalties were introduced?
It did. By 2004, when penalties were actually attached, the rate fell to 1 to 2%. But critics, especially in Congress, immediately jumped on the weaknesses of that first real policy.
What were the main criticisms? Penalties?
Penalties were a huge one. The policy used what's called progressive discipline, very common in union contracts.
Meaning?
It meant you got multiple chances. It was something like a 10-day suspension for the first positive test, then 30 days, then 60, then a year. You needed 5 positive tests before you got a lifetime ban.
5 strikes.
Yeah. Congress members were outraged. They were like, this isn't some workplace infraction. This is illegal drug use. You're giving players 4 free passes to break the law before facing serious consequences.
So the union influence was seen as protecting players over cleaning up the game.
That was the clear implication. Job security prioritized over integrity.
What about the testing process itself? Were there loopholes there too?
Oh, yeah. Experts pointed out flaws. Dr. Gary Wadler testified about procedural weaknesses.
Like what?
For instance, the urine sample collection. If a player didn't provide enough urine, say, less than 75 milliliters, the procedure was apparently to just discard the sample and tell the player to come back later after drinking more fluids.
Wait, seriously? They could just leave?
That's what was described. It created this obvious window, right? A player could potentially leave, flush their system, maybe even figure out a way to substitute the sample later. A massive vulnerability.
Okay, that's a big flaw. And then there was the issue of what wasn't being tested for.
The elephant in the room. Human growth hormone, HGH.
Players just shifted to that.
That became the dominant narrative, later confirmed by the Mitchell report. As testing for traditional anabolic steroids got better, Players who wanted to cheat simply moved over to HGH.
Why HGH? Was it harder to detect?
Much harder, especially with the urine tests MLB was using. HGH occurs naturally in the body and metabolizes very quickly. Urine tests just weren't reliable for detecting synthetic HGH use.
So you needed blood tests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blood testing was necessary, but the Players Association resisted that strongly for a long time. Privacy concerns, invasiveness.
So the league knew they couldn't catch HGH users with their current tests.
Officials basically admitted it. They knew they'd only solved part of the problem. They might be catching steroid users, but the HGH users were likely slipping through.
It sounds like this endless cat-and-mouse game. Chemists creating designer steroids.
Like THG, the Clear, developed by Belso.
And the testers constantly playing catch-up.
Precisely. The league realized they were kind of outgunned. Dealing with sophisticated chemistry, international supply chains. It wasn't just about catching players injecting basic testosterone anymore.
Selig's office even said the game's integrity was still sinking if they didn't get a handle on it, right?
Yeah, they recognized the severity. The conclusion started to form, pushed by experts and government, that maybe sports leagues weren't equipped to handle this alone. They needed something more independent, more robust.
Like WIDA, the World Anti-Doping Agency.
Exactly. Adopting that international gold standard, with its independence and comprehensive testing, started to look like the only real solution.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Donaghy, Black Sox, steroids. These aren't just isolated scandals in different sports. There's a thread here.
There's definitely a pattern, a philosophical thread even.
Which is?
That whenever huge money, intense media focus, and the pressure to win all converge, the integrity of the game gets squeezed, it gets compromised, whether it's by gambling or performance enhancers or maybe even other influences.
Like in boxing. That sport always seems to live under a shadow of doubt.
Boxing is the classic example. Think about the Sonny Liston versus Muhammad Ali fights, 1964 and 1965.
A phantom punch.
Exactly, especially the second fight. Rumors were flying about mob influence that Liston was told to take a dive. Then comes this punch from Ali that barely looks like it connects. Liston goes down, fight's over.
And people still argue about whether that punch was real.
They do. But almost more important than the physical reality is the perception. The controversy itself, the widespread belief that the fight might have been fixed, damaged the sport's credibility immensely.
So in all these cases, a ref making bad calls, a slugger hitting impossible home runs, a boxer going down mysteriously, the institution has to make a choice.
It constantly faces this dilemma. Do we protect the absolute purity of the competition, even if it's messy or less profitable? Or do we prioritize the spectacle, the revenue, the narrative?
Which leads to maybe a cynical view, but is the scandal itself part of the product now?
It's hard to ignore that possibility in the modern media landscape. Scandals generate clicks, controversy drives engagement, wall-to-wall coverage.
So the insider info, who's betting, who's doping, who might take a dive, that information itself has value.
It's become a currency. It feeds the sports news cycle, the analysts, the fantasy leagues, and now, critically, the legal sports betting markets themselves. The data, the speculation, it's all part of the ecosystem.
Okay, so let's summarize the arc we've traced. There's a pattern.
Definitely. A fix happens or cheating is exposed.
Public outrage follows. Demands for action.
The leagues respond, usually with some reforms, often incremental. Tighten a rule here, add a testing protocol there.
But the cheating doesn't stop. It just adapts.
It evolves. It shifts. From throwing games in 1919 to maybe influencing point spreads in 2007 to using undetectable performance enhancers like HGH. The methods change to bypass the new safeguards.
And underlying it all is this institutional reluctance, a tendency to not regulate too aggressively unless forced.
The historical evidence strongly suggests that. The Black Sox and Donaghy scandals show the need to guard against external threats, gamblers, fixers.
While the steroid era shows the danger of the internal threat.
Right, the threat born from the league's own success, the chase for records, ratings, revenue, creating an environment where cheating flourishes, maybe even implicitly encouraged until it blows up publicly.
So self-regulation tends to be slow, cautious, maybe reactive.
Until external forces like the FBI or Congress or just overwhelming public disgust compel a stronger response. They want the image of integrity, but the engine of profit often seems to dictate the actual priorities.
Which leaves us with a pretty challenging thought.
It really does. It makes you question the whole enterprise.
This raises an important question. If the game isn't rigged in some way, shape, or form, why does every decade seem to expose another fix, another scandal?
And the flip side.
And if it is, maybe not always rigged in the old-fashioned sense, but compromised, influenced by money, by internal pressures, who really profits when we all keep watching?